The story of David and Goliath is one that we've probably all heard before. A young shepherd boy defeats a giant warrior with just a sling and a stone. But what can we learn from this classic story? Let's find out. We are continuing our series of videos looking at various Bible stories. We're going to be looking at the story of David and Goliath. So let's look at the background, the main event, and some lessons for us today. So we see this story in the Old Testament, in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, and it's one of my favorite stories because it's an epic underdog story. It's the ultimate David versus Goliath scenario. If you ever feel like you're facing giants in your life, this is the story for you. Israel and the Philistines were about to go into battle. Now, both of these nations were camped out by a valley, and every day there would be some fighting going on back and forth. There was a small group of warriors who would come out and they would fight in one-on-one combat. One day, the Philistines lined up their champion. This guy was a giant. He was 6 cubits tall, so he was around 9 feet tall. That's big. He had a helmet made of bronze. He was wearing armor made of bronze. The scales of his armor alone weighed 5,000 shekels of silver. So you do the math. He was carrying a new sword made of bronze. His spear was made of bronze, the point of his spear was made of iron, and the staff that was holding his shield was made of iron. Again, do the math. This guy looked like a monster. Now, the Philistines wanted to pick someone from Israel to fight this guy. And here comes David, a young shepherd boy. He's skipping over to check on his brothers, who were part of King Saul's army. When he heard the Philistines bragging and talking trash about the Israelites, he said, "Hey, wait a minute, why are you guys talking trash about my God? He's going to defeat your champion." And one of David's older brothers said, "Hey, kid, don't talk like that. You're just a young kid. Do you even know what you're talking about? Besides, we're not allowed to fight those guys one-on-one anyway. And even if I did go out there, I couldn't fight that big lug." David thought, "No way, I have to do something." So he went straight to King Saul and told him, "Hey, let me fight this guy." "Why not?" King Saul said, "No, no, no, you're not gonna fight this guy. You're just a kid, there's no way." But David insisted. He said, "No, I have to do this. Please let me fight him." David insisted so much that King Saul finally gave in and agreed to let him fight. Now, what does David do? He goes and gets 5 smooth stones. He took them in his bag, and then he went to confront the giant. When the giant saw David coming, he was laughing and jeering. And he said, "Hey, you come to fight me with a staff? That's funny, is that all you got? Bring it on." So David ran toward the giant. He took a stone, put it in his sling, swung it around his head, and hit the giant right between the eyes. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face first onto the ground. David ran over, grabbed his sword, pulled it out, cut off the giant's head, and then the Israelites won the battle. They defeated the Philistines. So let's take a look at a few things we can learn from this amazing story. Number 1, we learn that the enemy will try to get us to focus on the size of the problem. When the Israelites saw this giant, what do you think they were saying to themselves? "No way, there's no way we can win. There's no way we can defeat this guy. He's too big. He's too strong." In fact, when King Saul saw David going out to fight, he said, "You're not going to defeat this guy. There's no way." What happens when we start focusing on the size of the problem? Well, we lose heart, we get scared, we start to panic. And sometimes we can even start to doubt God. But we need to remember, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Just because something looks impossible, just because something looks really difficult or really scary, that doesn't mean that God isn't going to help us. Maybe He wants to help us. Number 2, we learn that the enemy will try to make us feel unprepared. The giant wasn't only big, but he was also a very skilled warrior. He was a professional soldier. He had been fighting for years. And I imagine the Israelites looking at this guy thinking, "That's not only too big, he's too strong, but he's also too experienced. There's no way I can beat him." But here comes David, and David wasn't only too young, He was too inexperienced. He hadn't had any training. He didn't have any experience. He didn't know how to fight. David was definitely out of his element. And yet, again, he said, "No way, I have to do something." And you know what? Most of us, when we're facing giants in our life, we probably feel unprepared. We might say, "I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I'm beautiful enough. I don't know if I'm talented enough. There's no way I can handle this." But we need to remember, once again, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Number 3, we learn that the enemy will try to make us feel unqualified. Not only did David feel like he was too young and too inexperienced, he also felt like he was too small. I can just imagine him going up against this giant, and the giant is laughing and jeering and making fun of him. He's saying, "Hey, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to come after me? Because you're not only too young, you're not only inexperienced, you're also too small. There's no way you can beat me." Sometimes the enemy will try to make us feel like we read too much of something or we read not enough of something. Maybe we feel like we read too much of a certain personality type or we read not enough of a certain personality type. Maybe we feel like we read too much of a certain gender, or maybe we read not enough of a certain gender. Maybe we feel like we're too emotional or we're not enough of logical. Whatever the case may be, sometimes the enemy will try to convince us that we read too much of something or we read not enough of something. But we need to remember, once again, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And number 4, we learn that the enemy will try to distract us from our purpose. When David was going out to fight the giant, he probably could have used many different weapons. I mean, he had a sword, he had a spear, he had a sling. I'm sure he had some other stuff with him, but do you know what? He didn't use those weapons. He used a stone. A stone is probably one of the most simple weapons, right? But David used what he had. Sometimes the enemy will try to distract us from doing what we need to do, try to get us to not use the tools that God has given us, to not use the gifts that God has given us, to not use the talents that God has given us. Sometimes the enemy will try to distract us from our purpose. Sometimes the enemy will try to distract us from our mission. But we need to remember once again, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. So the next time you're facing a giant, remember, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Until next time, thanks for watching.